Welcome once again to the Influencers Podcast. We are here to see the influence of your life grow. That you have been equipped by your Father to be a victor. Welcome to the Influencers Podcast. I'm Scott Young. Our co-host Dave Donaldson is out on assignment, but I'm glad that you are a part of an incredible conversation we're going to have today. Sort of about the generations. You know, the largest generation in our nation now is not the baby boomers, not the Gen Z, not Gen Y, not Gen X. It's the millennials. The millennials are really the children of the baby boomers, born in the 80s and 90s. Some people define it a little closer to 81 to 96, but they are a predominant factor in culture and society. If you're going to lead anything, if you're going to sell anything, if you're going to grow any kind of organization, you have to know about the millennials. And our guest today, Danita Bye, has written a fascinating book called Millennials Matter, which are proven strategies for building your next gen team. She's given a fascinating TED Talk that you can look up on millennial leadership. Her graduate degree is in leadership. She grew up in the great state of North Dakota on the beautiful Triple T Ranch, a little bit of heaven on earth. And after spending 30 years in Minnesota, she's returned to North Dakota, and she does a variety of things, including serving on the North Dakota State Board of Higher Education. She's been married to Gordon for 38 years, and he's a fascinating character in himself. They have 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and Danita, I want to welcome you to the Influencers Podcast.
Well, I am so honored to be here, and we're going to have a great conversation, even though Dave isn't here.
We will do our best in his absence. What you millennials? You've done a lot of reading, studying. What is unique about leading millennials or reaching millennials?
So there are a lot of things that are unique. I would submit that the things that are most important are actually foundational things. For example, so recently I did an article on courageous leadership, and I was tying some of the experiences that our daughter Danae had in climbing Mount Kilimanjaro with our practical leadership day-to-day experiences. And one of the things that she found was so important in making certain that she got to the top, that she actually summited, is that she had a right guide. And the right guide is someone who is trustworthy. And so, as we look at it, that could be kind of a fancy, it's not a fancy thing. It's foundational in that we as leaders are trustworthy in terms of how we communicate and how we live. So my master's is in transformational leadership. And one of the key, what I love about transformational leadership is that leadership starts with the character of the leader. It actually starts deeper than that. It starts with the relationships that the leader has with God, with themselves and others, and the character flows out of that. So that doesn't necessarily answer your question in terms of what's unique, but it does begin to focus on what are the core solid things that we need to be focusing on as leaders.
Do you think millennials trust easily, or does trust have to be earned? And is it difficult to earn their trust in order to lead and work with them?
No, they do not trust easily.
Okay.
I mean, Scott, if you think about even the transition in trust that has happened within our lifetime, that trust has eroded in all major institutions. Trust has eroded in all media. And along with that, trust has eroded with anybody that's older than them,
Okay.
because they see that we've bought the problems on. And so, that's why we as leaders, it's a continual challenge to look at ourselves, and are we leading with clarity and competence and character, to always taking a double check on ourselves, um, uh, so that we provide that firm foundation. So it is going to be earned. It is not going to be given.
Is it different than the 60s would say, well, there was a generational gap and the generation before us didn't understand us. And so there was a lot of casting off of restraint. And uh, uh, is it the same or is it different? Or does this happen in every generation or is it more unique to the millennials?
That's a great question. It does happen in every generation. And I believe that it is accelerated by everything that's happening in the culture currently.
Mm, mm,
I call it a era of exponential growth. And if we think about everything that's all the changes that are happening, whether it's financially, medically, technically, cars drive themselves. I have a robot that cleans my house. I was reading the other day that you can order a DNA change kit. If you don't like the way that, if you don't like yourself, you can order a change DNA kit. I mean, it's crazy. So, we have all those incredible changes that are happening. We have Chat GPT that, some say is going to, have exponential positive growth for society, and others are saying it's uh, our demise. So you have all this rapid change that's happening, which is exciting for some. And for others, it's terrifying.
mm.
And no matter who we are, and I think especially for the millennials and for next gen leaders, it's like a constant state of fear.
Mm.
Um, there's a book, uh, United States of Fear, Dr. Mark McDonald, and he says something about fear that I believe is important for us as leaders to understand. And here's what he says: when fear is the predominant emotion, it overpowers every other feeling. It overpowers love, it overpowers hate, it paralyzes rational faculties, it makes it impossible to think.
Mm-hmm.
So if we think of all these changes that are happening in the world around us, and this um, this underlayment of fear that's happening, um, I believe we're living at a time where this is an even greater level of stress on young leaders than it was in the 60s.
So they would need a fear would be a negative emotion, I would think, that needs healing. So how can we help, pray for, coach, counsel? How do we help a generation deal with the pandemic of fear they seem to be facing?
That's a great question. And we've really been working through that with my recent article series
Mm-hmm.
on courageous leadership. And as I mentioned, what had sparked this with my daughter's Danae climb to the top of Kilimanjaro.
Mm-hmm.
Um, She discovered in her research that 50% of the people who start the climb don't make it.
Wow.
They fail 50%. That's astounding to me. And so, as in her research, she found that there were 3 reasons that they fail. They have the wrong route, they have the wrong mindset, and they have the wrong guide.
Mm.
And as I think about how do we mentor, how do we coach, how do we build up the young leaders that are in our sphere of influence, I believe that those are 3 things that we can do, that we can help them have the right route, the
Mm-hmm.
right mindset, and the right guide. And so as I think about here, so what Danae learned with the wrong route is have you climbed Kilimanjaro?
I haven't. I've seen it, but not climbed it.
Have you climbed some others?
Machu Picchu.
Okay. So, quite an adventure and quite an accomplishment. Congratulations. Well, what she talks about is that within a very short time frame, that you're going from bushland to rainforest to uh, there's like 6 or 7 climate changes until
Mm-hmm.
you end up at the top where no plant or animal life can sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what uh, the people who fail do is they take the easy route. They take the easy route, and they don't give their bodies time to acclimate and to be able to really utilize the oxygen. So it's very important that we choose the right route. And I believe that one of the key right routes that we can be coaching and building our young leaders with is to have an ownership mindset. My core field of experience is working with sales leaders. And as we've looked at over 2 million salespeople, one of the things that we've discovered is that those who are successful year after year after year after year, they don't blame the economy. They don't blame the market. They don't blame their boss. They don't blame the marketing department. They don't blame fill in the blank. They will always say, what might I do
Hmm.
to, what might I do to hit my numbers? What might I do to communicate more effectively? What might I do to build my skill level? They're always looking at how they might build their own capacity.
Mm-hmm.
60% of the salespeople don't do that. 60%. And I believe that that is a kind of I'll call it a core flaw of our culture.
Okay.
We love to play the blame game. And so it becomes important for us as leaders to be able to coach an ownership mindset. And as we do that, that helps to curb fear, and it
Mm-hmm.
helps to build confidence. So that's one key coaching tip.
So if a millennial, you have one on your team, or you're trying to like get better leadership into them, and they are, well, they're blaming, it's not that my socks were stuck in the wall, whatever their excuse
That's right.
is. But how do you then, say, okay, let's just address, how do we get turn on the lights, I guess. The ownership mindset, I like that wording even. How do we turn the lights on and go, oh, no, no, there's something you can do to shift your perspective, the way you look at it, and really own the emotion you're having in this moment. How do we do that?
Well, the way that I've done it, that has been successful as I've been managing and leading teams is, obviously you're going to, I hear you,
Mm-hmm.
etc. And then it really is to ask, I call it a catalytic question,
Okay.
which is, what might you do to fill in the blank, whatever needs to be done? And um, uh, and that question is power packed. The first word of that question is what.
Mm-hmm.
It's not who, it's not why, it's what.
Mm-hmm.
The next word is might. I'm not looking for, you know, one solid reason. Let's start brainstorming. Let's be creative.
Yeah.
So, what might you do to, and that's just a power packed question.
I think it's worth people listening to what we've done so far just to get that question, because that would unlock a lot of conversations with a lot of young leaders. You may have them on your team. So just listen to the question again. What might you do? Not what has to change in culture, society, the alignment of the stars. What might you do to fill in the blank? So that's a
Right.
great question. So you've said they shouldn't always choose the easy route because they don't. That may knock them out. They may have the wrong mindset, and I think we talked a little bit about the right kind of guide. But I think I think millennials are. Well, let me pose the question rather than say what I think. Are millennials looking for mentors or not?
The data says that they are looking for mentors. They're looking for coaches. They're looking for people who can come alongside them as they work through this process of life.
Hmm.
They are not looking for teachers that tell them what to do. They are looking for people who are going to come alongside and ask them questions. It was interesting as I was preparing for our conversation today, Scott. I was reviewing um, uh, how Danae talks about this guide. And
Hmm.
here's what she says. It was on the final day of our hike. My headlamp goes out. My guide sees this, and without a word, he hands me his.
Hmm.
And, I got even choked up as I read that. And I thought, how we as leaders are we walking alongside those young people or the young leaders that are coming up and around us in our sphere of influence? And what does it look like that without a word, we're going to extend a hand and help them? I don't know. I don't know the answer, but it was compelling to me to think about that we would be so invested in their success that we're going to give out the headlamp when theirs goes out.
I think that's called servant leadership.
Hmm.
And I think Ken Blanchard wrote an endorsement for your book. I
You
think I read.
did.
Okay, that was a memory I was stretching for. So, and he is just huge
Yes.
on servant leadership, and it may be a key for us just to um, consider our relationships with millennials and ask ourselves, am I serving? Like, just a beautiful metaphor. Am I taking my lamp off and handing it without a word to the generation that really needs it? Just seeing the need and just asking, how can I step in and how can I serve? So, do you
Well,
think,
and if
sir?
I
Yeah,
could,
go ahead.
Scott, just quickly, just
Yeah.
as we continue to think through that, it is, and perhaps this is part of the art of leadership, is that we're not um, giving the headlight too soon, the headlamp
Okay.
too soon,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not
Okay.
giving it too late. And there's that. Um, um, I'll call it kind of. It's the art of leadership, and it might be listening to the Holy Spirit
Yes. Yeah.
in terms of how we help and nurture them along. So,
And I think our real model in servant leadership, of course, is Jesus.
yeah.
I think he teaches us that the greatest among you is the one that serves. I like to ask the question constantly when I'm in a room, how can I serve? What needs to be done in this room? And I think maybe I need to be a little. I have a lot of young staff. Of course, all my kids are millennials, and I've got a young staff I work with, and just ask the question, how can I best serve them? I think that's a great question. And then this other question, um, what might you do? What might you do about?
What might you do?
That's
Yes,
true.
very much so. One of the other, so I've just finished the series on courageous leadership, and I'm
Okay.
moving into a series um, of on the power of gratefulness in
Okay.
leadership.
I think that's good.
And um, I had maybe about a month ago, I was cleaning out some old files, and I found a 3x5 card that I had taped to my wall when I first started my career. I didn't have computers when I first started my career, but I did have an old pickup telephone. I was in sales, and I had read Dale Carnegie,
Yeah.
and the um, the key idea I took out of that book was don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Hmm.
And if we think about what happens or what we hear, mainstream media, social media, it's like our world is
Hmm.
criticizing, condemning, and complaining. And so the question is, how do we as leaders counteract that? And I believe that one of the ways that we do that is through an is through gratitude.
Yeah. I think that when we can find something to be grateful for, it's a good day and a good moment. And I think it helps us to grow. In fact, you talk about in your metaphor about going up Kilimanjaro, we talked about the fear zone, maybe the learning zone. Then you talk about the growth zone, which I think is where we want to get people to. And
Yes.
what is that growth zone and how can we help people to access it?
I just had a very practical experience on this within the last 24 hours.
Hmm.
Last night, we had some people over, and they gave me a kidney punch comment. I was like, whoa. So that's where we have a line in the road. We can either,
Mm-hmm.
criticize, complain, get bitter about that,
Mm-hmm.
or we can take that before the Lord and realize that um, what I ask myself is, how can I take this comment that was meant to break me? How can, through the power of the Holy Spirit, that be used to build me and my leadership and to build me in the character of Jesus Christ? So I
Mhm.
believe that gratitude is what fuels that.
And I think we've all had those kidney punch comments. That's not unique to you, but I said they're inevitable, but getting angry over them is optional. And I think you maybe chose the right option. If Gord was there, I don't know what he would have done, but because Gord speaks his mind. That's what I love about him.
He does.
So let me
And
thank
he's a great
yeah.
encourager.
So we encourage our friends to get a hold of the book on millennials and on their leadership, or anything that uh, Danita has been writing. You can go to DanitaBye.com and connect with the resources that are available from her pen. The article she publishes in several publications. And I'll end with one question, and that would be, if you're looking back on your life, what do you wish you knew sooner that would have made a huge difference in your life, and you just wish you had that lesson sooner?
Well, that's a great question. I'll tell you what I'm processing today. What
Should I
what I'm uh, go ahead,
no, did you hear the question? Or I'll say it, restate it. So
restate
the
it.
yeah, the question is that, looking back on your life, is what you wish you would have known sooner that would have made a huge difference in your life, and you just said that would have been better to know 20 years ago.
What I'm processing today is that um, there are many desires and dreams that I believe God has put into my heart, the Holy Spirit has put into my heart, and to know that those will be realized in His way and not in my way. And, at the place where I am right now, I get approached to serve on all different types of boards and pursue all sorts of venues. And I have a gazillion ideas for books in my mind. And I'm at the point now, unless the Holy Spirit is in it, unless it is God's hand in it, I am not going there. It will be frustrating. It will be a waste. It will not deliver long-term results. So the lesson is to recognize that unless the Lord is in it, don't pursue it.
That's great advice. And I took a few notes on our conversation too, and I want to just I want to be more intentional about my gratitude. Thank you very much. I want to be more intentional, especially when it comes to millennials, being a servant leader. And I want to learn how to ask better questions. And Danita, I want to thank you for being part of the Influencers podcast. We appreciate you and your family. And we, of course, pray for you. We did that before we began, and we'll continue to pray for you. And for all of our friends that have been listening, make sure that you continue to show up and be a positive influence in the rooms you enter in. Bring hope,
Absolutely.
bring light, bring joy, bring some gratitude, bring some great questions, and
Absolutely.
just help the world to be a better place. Thanks so much, Danita.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Influencers Podcast on the Charisma Podcast Network.
If you enjoy our content, we would love for you to subscribe and have the opportunity to tune in to future podcasts. You can follow us on all social media platforms at the Influencers Podcast Official. You can stay up to date, hear more inspiring content, and unlock your full potential as an influencer.
Remember to use your influence to create lasting change that draws the world closer to Jesus.